gentle sound of a ceiling fan whirring filled the small bedroom, blending seamlessly with the faint chatter of morning life outside. Sunlight spilled through half-closed blinds, cutting soft golden lines across the cream-colored walls. It was the kind of morning that didn't demand urgency, a rare pause in the chaos of everyday life. Sophia stretched under the covers, the cool sheets tangling around her legs. Her phone buzzed quietly on the nightstand, but she ignored it for now, savoring the stillness. The soft scent of jasmine lingered in the room from a candle she had forgotten to blow out the night before, and for a moment, everything felt like it was frozen in a gentle calm. Outside her window, the city was waking up. A street vendor's melodic call echoed faintly in the distance, while the rhythmic clatter of someone sweeping their front porch added a soothing backdrop to the morning symphony. The occasional beep of a motorbike and laughter from children playing on the sidewalk made the world feel alive but not overwhelming. Sophia finally sat up, her dark hair a tousled mess that she lazily pushed to one side. Her studio apartment was small, but carefully curated. Plants hung from macrame holders by the window, their leaves thriving under her care. A wooden desk in the corner held her laptop, stacks of notebooks, and a small mug filled with pens and paintbrushes. Above it, a corkboard was pinned with photos, to-do lists, and a few scraps of poetry she had scribbled on napkins during late-night musings. She shuffled into the kitchenette, her bare feet padding softly against the tile floor. The small space was neatly organized, a mix of warm wood and muted greens that made it feel welcoming. As she reached for the electric kettle, her mind wandered, still foggy from sleep. She moved on autopilot, pouring water into the kettle and setting it to boil. The aroma of ground coffee filled the air as she prepared her favorite ceramic mug, the one with tiny cracks along the rim, but still her most cherished. The first sip of coffee was always the best, warm, slightly bitter, and grounding. Sophia leaned against the counter, gazing out of the small window above the sink. Her view wasn't extraordinary, just a narrow alleyway framed by neighboring apartment buildings, but it was hers. A cat slinked lazily across a brick wall below, pausing to bathe itself in a patch of sunlight. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her out of her reverie. She wandered back to her bed and picked it up, scrolling through the usual notifications. Texts from her mom reminding her to eat properly, a meme from her best friend Anna, and a flurry of updates from the group chat she barely kept up with. It was all comfortingly normal. Sophia's mornings were always slow like this. She liked it that way. After finishing her coffee, she pulled on a loose cardigan and stepped out onto the small balcony connected to her apartment. The world below was alive with movement. A vendor wheeling a cart of fresh fruits, an elderly man walking his dog, a delivery driver balancing a precarious pile of packages. Sophia sat on the rattan chair she had found at a thrift store, her legs curled beneath her as she sipped her second cup of coffee. The balcony had become her sanctuary, a little pocket of peace in the middle of the bustling city. Potted plants lined the railing, their leaves still glistening with morning dew. She made a mental note to water them later, though she wasn't in a rush. There was something comforting about the slow rhythm of tending to her plants, like a grounding ritual that reminded her she was rooted, even when the world felt chaotic. A soft knock at the door startled her, breaking the tranquil spell of her morning. It wasn't urgent, just a polite, almost hesitant tap. Sophia set down her mug, her curiosity piqued. She wasn't expecting anyone, but the knock felt familiar, almost reassuring, as though the person on the other side of the door was someone she knew. She stood, brushing invisible creases from her cardigan, and moved toward the door. Her hand hesitated on the doorknob for a brief second before she turned it, the creak of the hinges echoing faintly in the quiet apartment. On the other side of the door stood a uniform and holding a small package. His smile was warm but professional, the kind of practiced expression that came with delivering dozens of parcels a day. Sophia tilted her head slightly, puzzled. She wasn't expecting anything. "Delivery for Sofia Garcia?" he asked, glancing at the label on the package. "That's me," she replied, her voice light with curiosity. She signed for the package and thanked him, watching as he walked briskly down the hallway before closing the door. The box was small, wrapped neatly in plain brown paper with no markings except her name and address. No sender, no note. Sophia placed it on the kitchen counter, staring at it for a moment as she sipped the last. Sophia stared at the small package for what felt like an eternity. The rest of the apartment seemed to fall away, leaving only her, the neatly wrapped box, and the quiet hum of her thoughts. She reached out to touch it, her fingers grazing the rough texture of the paper. There was nothing extraordinary about it at first glance, yet something about its simplicity felt deliberate, intentional in a way that made her hesitate. The morning light streaming through the window shifted, casting soft shadows across the kitchen counter. Sophia set her mug aside and finally peeled back the tape sealing the package. The paper came away smoothly, revealing a plain white box underneath. She opened the lid carefully, her breath catching slightly, as though she expected something dramatic to unfold. Inside was a small black flash drive, resting on a bed of crumpled tissue paper. That was it. No note, no instructions, nothing to explain who had sent it or why. She frowned, turning the box over in her hands, hoping for some hidden clue, but there was nothing else. The flash drive sat there, unassuming yet magnetic, drawing her attention like a quiet whisper she couldn't quite ignore. Sophia walked to her desk, setting the box down next to her laptop. Her reflection stared back at her in the dark screen, her face a mix of curiosity and caution. The air in the room felt heavier now, as if it were holding its breath alongside her. She hesitated for a long moment, her hand hovering over the laptop's lid before finally flipping it open. The familiar hum of the device booting up filled the silence, grounding her. She plugged in the flash drive, her movements slow and deliberate. A single folder appeared on the screen, titled simply, "For You." Her pulse quickened, the simplicity of the name amplifying the weight of the moment. She clicked it open, revealing a video file. The thumbnail was blurry, indistinct, offering no hints as to its contents. Sophia hovered over it, her finger trembling slightly before she double-clicked. The screen went black for a few seconds, and then the video began to play. At first, it was nothing but static, a low hum crackling faintly through her speakers. Then, the image shifted, grainy footage of a narrow alleyway, shot from a shaky handheld camera. Sophia recognized it immediately. It was the view from her apartment window. Her breath hitched as the camera lingered on the brick wall where the cat had sunbathed that morning, the angle impossibly familiar. She leaned closer to the screen, her heart pounding in her chest. The footage cut abruptly to another scene, this time inside her apartment. Her hands flew to her mouth as she saw herself sitting on the balcony, sipping coffee and sketching in her notebook. The angle was close, too close to be anything other than deliberate. Whoever had filmed this had been inside her home. Sophia's chest tightened as the video continued. The footage shifted again, this time to her opening the package just minutes ago. The camera zoomed in on her face as she peeled back the paper, her expression a mix of curiosity and unease. She felt her stomach drop. This wasn't just a recording. It was happening in real time. Her hands shook as she slammed the laptop shut, the abrupt silence almost deafening. She stood, backing away from the desk, as if the flash drive itself were alive. Her apartment, once her sanctuary, now felt foreign, every shadow a threat, every creak of the floorboards a warning. The walls seemed to close in, the air heavy with an oppressive stillness. And then, as she stood frozen in the middle of the room, her phone buzzed on the counter. The sound was jarring, slicing through the silence like a blade. She stared at it, her feet rooted to the spot. The screen lit up with a new text, the sender listed as unknown. "Do you see now, Sophia? We're just getting started." The message sent a chill down her spine, her breath catching in her throat. She glanced around the room, her eyes darting to the locked windows and bolted door. But the message wasn't just a threat. It felt like a challenge, a sinister invitation to step into a world she didn't understand. Sophia didn't move, the weight of the moment pressing down on her like a tidal wave. The rain outside had started again, soft at first, then growing heavier, each drop a reminder of the storm brewing not just outside, but within her life. She stood there, her thoughts spinning, the text glowing faintly in the darkened room. For the first time, her quiet